Welcome back everyone. In this video I'm going to work through two problems from Appendix 4B related to the allocation of service costs. If you haven't viewed the discussion video for Appendix 4B, maybe check that out first. The first one I was going to look at was exercise 4B-1 here, employing the direct method of allocation as discussed in that appendix. And the setup for that said Seattle Western University has provided the following data to be used in its service department cost allocations. So we can see they have two service departments, administration and facility services, and then two operating departments, the undergrad programs and then the grad programs. We also know the departmental costs for each of those departments before allocations, and then we know the student credit hours that were consumed or used or tabulated in the operating departments, and then the square footage occupied by all four of the departments. So the requirement here was using the direct method. We want to allocate the cost of the service departments, administration and facilities, to the two operating departments. We want to allocate the administration cost based on student credit hours and the facility services cost based on space occupied. And if you recall from our discussion with our Appendix 4B here, we want to try to choose allocation bases that best reflect what really drives those costs or causes those costs to be consumed. So for something like administration, it would make sense that student credit hours would be an appropriate driver there, right? The more students we have, the more classes they're taking, the more administrative costs and tasks we have. Similarly, for something like facilities, so that's janitorial and like maintenance and things like that, it's probably going to equate with how much space is occupied by the particular department. We think about more cleaning is needed, more maintenance, right? Checking on the HVAC, the equipment in the classrooms, and so on. So let's get started here. I did a little bit of pre-setup here in Excel. So I've got my two service departments listed and my two operating departments. I've got a line for the departmental cost before allocations, and then the cost allocated, and then we'll also make sure we have a line down here for the costs after allocations, so we can make sure we double check that. So I'm going to list the departmental costs before allocations, just as shown in the table there in the problem. So administration, $2,400,000. Facility services, $1,600,000. The biggest cost here, $26,800,000 in the undergrad programs, and then the grad programs, $5,700,000. Now, if you recall, when we're allocating service department costs, we need to make sure we allocate every single dollar from those service departments. So what I want to indicate here for administration, just for sort of my own double check and tying out purposes, is that I'm allocating all $2,400,000 elsewhere. So the cost after allocations, in other words, for my service departments, as we talked about, should always be zero. So in fact, I'll pop that in for facilities as well. We want to make sure that's the case. Okay, so let's allocate the administration costs here. That's $2,400,000 in total. And again, we're going to be allocating those on the basis of student credit hours. So here for the undergrad program allocation, I'll take the $2,400,000 times the relative portion of the student credit hours that were used or needed by the undergrad programs. So that's 20,000, as we can see in the table there, divided by the total student credit hours across both operating departments. So 20,000 in undergrad plus the 5,000 in grad. In other words, the undergrad programs needed or used or consumed 20,000 of the 25,000 total credit hours across both those operating departments. So there's my allocation to the undergrad programs, $1,920,000. Same idea here for the grad programs. I'll take the same $2,400,000, just to be thorough, times that relative portion of the student credit hours originated, generated, used in that department. So 5,000 divided by, again, the sum across both operating departments of 20,000 plus 5,000. Okay. And there's my allocation to the grad programs. Now I always want to double check, make sure I've allocated every dollar. So the sum of these here, $2,400,000, yeah, I'm good to go. Okay. And let's do the same now for facility services. I want to make sure I allocate all $1,600,000. So we'll make sure we plug that in there just to show we're reconciling or tabulating to zero down here. So facility services is going to be allocated based on square footage occupied. So I'll take the 1,600,000 total cost for facility services. The allocation to the undergrad programs then, I'll multiply by the relative portion of the square footage used by the undergrad programs, but only relative to all the operating departments combined. Remember, we don't care about the usage of that allocation based by the service departments, because under this direct method, we're only allocating service department costs to operating departments. So I only want to focus on the usage here in the operating departments. So that'll be 70,000 square feet divided by a total of 70,000 plus the 30,000 over there in the grad programs. In other words, 70,000 of the 100,000 total, or 70% of this facilities cost, is being allocated to the undergrad programs. There we go. Okay. Same idea for the grad programs. I could plug the difference since I only have two departments if I wanted, but just to stay in the habit and make sure we're clear on how these calculations are done, let's be thorough. 1,600,000 is the total cost to be allocated, and I'm going to multiply that by the relative portion of square footage used by the grad programs. So that's 30,000 in that case, divided by, again, the total just across the operating departments. 70,000 plus 30,000. And there we are. Okay. We'll double check our total here. Yeah, we've got 1,600,000 allocated there, so we're good to go. And then let's get totals now for the total costs after allocation in the undergrad and the grad program. So I'm going to use the little sum function here in Excel, and then I'm going to drag that across to the grad programs. So as we can see, we've got 29,840,000 in total cost in the undergrad programs, and then 6,660,000 in total cost in the grad programs. And that consists of the 5,700,000 that originated in that department, plus now the 480,000 allocated from administrative costs, and the 480,000 allocated from facilities costs. Give this a pause and back up if you need to revisit any part of that problem or any part of the direct method, and then I'll do the step-down method here next. So 4B-2 has the step-down method, so I'll just kind of scroll it so we're focused on just one thing at a time here. And that one said Madison Park Co-op, a Whole Foods grocery and gift shop, has provided the following data to be used in its service department cost allocations. So we've got two service departments again, administration and janitorial, and then two operating departments, groceries and gifts. We know the departmental costs before allocations again. We know employee hours, and then space occupied in terms of square footage. And the requirement here is to use the step-down method and allocate the cost of the service departments to the two operating departments. We want to allocate administration first on the basis of employee hours, and then janitorial on the basis of space occupied. So remember, with our step-down method, we need to go sequentially or linearly or in a step-down fashion, starting with one service department, and then we're going to allocate all the costs from that service department to all the remaining departments. So that would be inclusive of both other service departments and operating departments. So let's make that happen here. I'm going to first list the departmental costs before allocations, just pulling that over from the table. So 150,000 in admin, 40,000 in janitorial, 2,320,000 in groceries, and then 950,000 in gifts. All right, so it told us to allocate administration first, but if it hadn't said that, that'd probably be a safe assumption anyway. Remember, with the step-down method, we want to start with the service department that's provided the most service. And so without any other info, we generally would assume that's the service department with the highest total cost. So I want to allocate all 150,000 now out of the admin department here. And I'm going to do that to all my remaining departments. So that's my janitorial service department, and then my two operating departments, groceries and gifts. So let's start here with the allocation to janitorial. I'll take my total administration costs, 150,000, times the relative portion of employee hours in that case used by the janitorial department or needed by the janitorial department relative to all the other departments to which I'm allocating this cost. Remember, in this case, we do not include then in that denominator the employee hours used by administration, right? Because administration is the cost we're allocating from, or the department we're allocating from. So this then would be 160 employee hours used by janitorial divided by 160 plus 3,100 plus the 740 over there in gifts. Okay? So again, that denominator there only includes the allocation base for the departments to which I'm going to be allocating these costs. Okay? So there's 6,000 in total. Same idea for groceries. I'll take the same 150,000 total cost from admin times the relative portion now of employee hours used by groceries. So 3,100 divided by the same allocation base, 160 plus 3,100 plus 740. And by the way, do these problems however you find most helpful. If you want to come up with the total allocation base first, so you're not adding it together here every time, that's perfectly fine. I just want to make sure for purposes of this illustration, it's kind of extra explicit. So there we go. Cost allocated 116,250. Now for the final department, I could plug the difference because I want to make sure I'm allocating all 150. But again, just to stay kind of extra thorough here for our practice, 150,000 in admin cost times the relative portion of employee hours used in the gifts department, 740 divided by the 160 plus the 3,100 plus that 740 again. There we go. I'll do my quick check to make sure I allocated everything. So my sum, 150,000. Yeah, I'm good to go there. Now, my second service department, from which I need to allocate all the costs, is janitorial. I just want to make sure now that I'm allocating all the costs that originated there, the 40,000, plus the costs that have been allocated from the admin department already. So if I look at that combined, I've got a total of 46,000 in janitorial costs that need to be allocated. So let's just indicate here then that I'm allocating, the 46,000 total janitorial department costs. Now janitorial costs were allocated on the basis of space occupied. So I'll take my total 46,000 here times the relative portion of the square footage used or occupied in groceries relative to the total allocation base, which would just be the two remaining departments, groceries plus gifts. So this would be the 4,000 square feet occupied by groceries divided by the total square footage across groceries and gifts only. So 4,000 plus 1,000. Again, we're not allocating backwards, so I don't need to think about the square footage used by admin. And since we're allocating janitorial costs, we don't need to worry about the square footage occupied by janitorial itself. So there's my total of 36,800. Now again, my last one I could plug if I wanted, but we'll just be thorough here. 46,000 is the total cost to be allocated, times the 1,000 square feet used in gifts, divided by, again, the total across my two remaining departments to which I'm allocating these costs, 4,000 plus 1,000. And there's my cost allocated of 9,200. So cost after allocation, again, in our service departments, we better make sure that's always zero, right? We need to allocate out, in other words, every single dollar of costs in those departments. Then we can come up with the total here for the groceries department and the gifts department. I'll drag my sum function over there. So we've got, what's that, 2,473,000 and some change in total costs in groceries. That's the 2,320,000 that originated there, plus the admin costs that have been allocated, plus the janitorial costs that have been allocated. Same idea with gifts. Their total cost of 986,950 consists of the 950,000 that originated there, plus the admin costs that had been allocated there, plus the janitorial costs that have been allocated there. If you need to back up and see any part of either of these problems again, please do so. If you need to back up and look at the discussion at all about sort of why we're doing these things, the appropriate methods by which we do these things, make sure you do that as well. And as always, let me know if you have any questions.